leadership. So, I'd like to have everybody give a nice Detroit welcome to my friend, Alicia Merriweather.
Good evening, everyone. See, I'm a former teacher, so let's try that again. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
You know, when Dave says he's going to give a few personal comments, I just had to stand really close to see if I had to yank him off. But that was all true, what he said. And thank you, Dave, for all of your service to children and to elevate science in not just Detroit, but Wayne County. Really give Dave a round of applause for his impact. My thoughts tonight are going to start with, and I think someone's going to flip them over here in a moment, but I want to start with just a welcome to the city of Detroit. As Dave said, I am a lifelong Detroit resident. I am very excited to be here tonight because it was a 5-minute commute for me. But for those of you who have traveled from around the world, and this is your first time in Detroit, would you raise your hand, first time in Detroit? How many of you had a good time in Detroit? I hope so. You know, tonight, and your theme for your meeting is around intersections of diverse environments and community. And I wanted to start tonight by welcoming you officially as a Detroit resident here to say you are welcome here in this community that is very diverse. And I wanted to start with a slide with some pictures of my favorite things in Detroit. And I'm not sure if you got to experience any of them, but we have the Detroit Institute of Arts. We have the DeQuinder Cut, which is an old railway track that's been turned into a bike track. We have in the lower left a picture of Belle Isle. I heard some of you went to Belle Isle. Yes? And those who speak French know Belle Isle means beautiful island, and I hope you found that to be true. And then the lower right there is Eastern Market, which is on a weekend, if you happen to be here through Saturday, one of the best places to visit on a weekend. So I wanted to start with an official welcome to Detroit. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm glad you got to see something that I've known my entire life, which is Detroit is an awesome city. It has struggles and it has triumphs, but we're doing things here that I think can be learned from, and hopefully you've enjoyed your time here. The context for my comments tonight really is rooted in my experience as both a student, a teacher, a supervisor, a professor, a resident, quite frankly, a human being. So as I looked at the themes of the meeting, I chose to focus on this concept of observation and appreciation, creating opportunities in all environments. And on this slide, you see what seems to be kind of two contextual differences. So you've got the cityscape, and that is Detroit, and then you have basically sky and land, vegetation, and sea. And the idea that in all these things, there can be observation and appreciation. And no matter where you live, and no matter where you do your work, or whatever your work is, observation and appreciation can be cultivated. And how does that happen? And so let's first obviously start with definitions. Observation, for the common definition tonight, to notice or perceive something and register it as significant. So not just to look. Those of us in science, when you do observations, it's not just looking. It's to notice and perceive and document things that are significant. The opposite of that is to overlook or to fail to see. So observation, finding things that are significant. The opposite of that is to overlook or to fail to see. And then appreciation, to recognize the full worth of and be grateful for something. The opposite of that is to disparage. And so as I move through this, I'm going to start really with a picture that is reminiscent of my childhood. What I picture up here is my dad's bird book as I was growing up. As Dave said, I lived in Detroit my whole life. And one of the things that I learned very early in life is to be observant. My dad was a science teacher, but he's also very passionate about birds and nature. He knew scientific names of everything. And what you see here are notes from his bird book. And why I pulled this out is because the location of the second sighting was, quote, my backyard. And I've already told you that I've lived in Detroit my whole life. So his observations happened in the backyard of a house about 10 miles from here. So my point about observations and finding value is they can happen anywhere. They need to be cultivated, an attitude of observation and appreciation. These next two pictures are me as a young person. The upper left is me at Belle Isle in the conservatory, digging straight into a flower, being very observant. I think I was using all 5 senses there. And then the second picture is actually a Christmas gift that was given, which was very significant when I look back because the book title was Creatures of the Night. So here I am, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old girl, and what my parents chose to give was a book about the creatures of the night, and there was another book about marine life, and so on and so forth. And I remember learning, even at a young age, to pay attention. So the books were not just books to read, it was about observing. When we went out for walks, it wasn't just about getting someplace. My dad would quiz us and say, what did you just see? Don't turn around. We would go someplace and he'd say, how many cars were there? What bird did you just see? And it taught me the beauty of being observant, of paying attention. And that applies not just to science and nature, but to people. To be observant. And again, that can happen anywhere. Now, this is also me as a young person with the binoculars and using tools to be more observant. These are all things that can be done anywhere, anytime. The quote here says, earth and sky, woods and fields, lakes and rivers, the mountain and the sea are excellent schoolmasters and teach some of us more than we can ever learn in books. John Lubbock. Now, when you think about this, I heard someone say that's true. How many of you have learned lessons from these things? From earth and sky and woods and fields, lakes and rivers? How many of you are doing investigations involving any of these elements right now? You're doing experiments, investigations. So this idea of being observant continues really, hopefully, throughout our entire lives. This actually is continuing my journey. In high school, I had to do a leaf project. How many of you had to do a leaf project at some point in your life? Yes. How many of you waited until the night before and just grabbed some things from the backyard? That was not me. I had to do this very intentionally with my dad, and the entire book of leaves, we had to have 50 unique leaves. They were all collected within the city of Detroit. And I will say it took several different trips, but we found 50 unique species, and of course my dad made me be very observant when I tried to use the same leaf on the next page, and he said that's just a different part of the sassafras leaf, so you cannot count it twice. So those kinds of things and learning scientific names all really led to a love of science and a love of nature and a love of observation. This next picture is from my experience teaching. I taught middle school science in the city of Detroit on the east side for about 12 years. Do I have any middle school science related people that teach middle school? There's a special place of honor for middle school teachers. Can we give them a round of applause? And I say that jokingly because honestly there's a special place for every single area of expertise. Early childhood is a special area of expertise. Adults, teaching adults is a very special area area of expertise. People think teaching middle school is challenging. If you've ever taught adults or spoken to a group, it can be challenging as well. So I think when we think about what we learn as young people, or through the course of our life, obviously it impacts what we do. And as a science teacher in Detroit, one of my biggest areas of focus was to make sure that I exposed my students to as many opportunities as possible. Because my thinking was that if I gave them as many keys as possible, then whatever door they came to, they'd have the key to open it. Now, whether or not they choose to go through that door will be up to them. But if I never help them get keys, then really shame on me. And so that's the way I approached my classroom. And we went out, this was actually outside of my schoolyard in Detroit. And that's a young person, and I asked them to be observant, to find things that they had not paid attention to before. And this whole activity helped young people be observant and learn to appreciate. Obviously, we did experiments and activities with water testing, and these are old photos, but I bring this up to a certain extent to say people have been doing project-based science for a long time. A lot of people in this room have been doing project-based science for a long time, and we know that when you do science and when you do experiments, you learn. You actually can retain information much better. And what I will tell you is the young people in these pictures, I taught them when they were 12 years old. And now they're 26 to 35 years old. And when I run into young people who I taught about observation and appreciation, what they say to me, and I always say to people who are thinking about being teachers or people who work with instruction, is I have never had, in the thousands of teachers that I've helped and in the thousands of kids that I've taught, I've never, ever, ever once had someone run up to me and say, Mrs. Merriweather, it's great to see you. Do you remember when we read chapter 8 and answered the questions? That was awesome. Nobody does that because it's not awesome. This is awesome. This is how people remember information, by observations, direct observations, interaction, and appreciation. And so I say this because every time I run into a young person who's now an adult, what they remember are the experiences. They remember canoeing to learn about ecosystems. They remember making rockets and blasting them off. They remember doing soil sample studies. They remember making soap out of lard and using sodium hydroxide when people said, maybe that's not a good idea with 7th graders. But they remember those things. And I just wanted to bring to your mind, as you think through what you take from this experience and how you choose to go forth, to think about these concepts of observation and appreciation. It's not enough really to observe if you don't then process and appreciate the observation. So a simple example, several of you here observed either Belle Isle, or you observed in all ways some of the food you went out to eat, but if you don't sit and appreciate after the observation sits in isolation. Does that make sense? Observation and appreciation. So we're going to do a little test. I told you I'm a former teacher. So what I'd like you to do right now, very quickly, I want you to do one observation of what you see and one appreciation. So take a look at the picture, one observation and one appreciation. So think of it. I'm going to have you turn and talk to a neighbor, and then when I need your attention back, I'll just count down from 5. So turn and talk. One observation and one appreciation. All right, one observation, one appreciation. 2. All right, 0, we're back. How many of you could identify one observation? There's one piece you could identify, and one appreciation. Hopefully you could. What I wanted to share with you is that photo is from my backyard in Southwest Detroit. It is a huge tree that has to have been there for 300 years, and it sits right in Southwest Detroit. That is observation, appreciation, intersection of diverse environments right in my backyard. Here's the second one. Second picture. So, one observation and one appreciation. Take a look, and you're going to turn and talk to someone different, even if that means you have to turn to a different table. So, one observation and one appreciation. About 30 seconds. Okay, we'll come back together in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Is there anyone with a loud, projecting voice who is willing to share an observation or appreciation that either you or your partner shared just now? Is there anyone in the room who's willing to share an observation and appreciation? We've got one over here. Go ahead.
Oh, hey, awesome. I observed the lily pads, and I appreciate the billions of years of evolution that went into creating those lily pads.
All right, give them a round of applause. All right, got a huge fan club over there, very good. All right, one more, young person. Go ahead.
I seen the lily pads, and they can help the frogs jump to hop one and one up.
Okay, so you're going on to the inference. And what's your appreciate? That
They help the frogs jump.
that's their appreciate, that they help. So they're there to help the living creatures. Let's give her a round of applause. All right, outstanding. Is there anybody else? One last person? Observation, appreciation? Anyone for the speaking box? Somebody's saying yes, yes, go. You can't volunteer other people. You can only volunteer yourself. We call that voluntold. You can't do that. All right, go ahead.
Appreciation, yes, or both of them.
Observation,
Yeah.
appreciation, both.
First of all, when we said first time this photo, and you look at the leaves, and you see the water, with, which is little polluted, so much organic matter, it's still alive. You see that it makes it keep equilibrium there. I think it's from a garden or something, but are still alive. This is a good observation, but I appreciate that they have the system there. Although there's another plant which is trying to, how to say, to limit her to be over. You understand? So this is what I see here. These leaves exist whatever happened, and they help other organisms.
So everything there is helping other organisms, and there's some ecosystem that's evident in the picture. Awesome. Give them a round of applause. So this picture was also taken in my backyard in Southwest Detroit. Yeah, you knew that already. So this is in my backyard as well. I don't have any frogs because we tried that and they kept escaping. And so we don't have frogs or turtles. But this is also in Southwest Detroit, an intersection of diverse environments. So I'm going to close with this. This quote from Rachel Carson. The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. And what you see in this picture are two photos from Detroit, and me as a young person making observations that have led to me as an adult making observations, and ideally observations and appreciations for the things around us. In my last slide, when you leave here, please say nice things about Detroit. Thank you.